All right, good evening. This is our January 20th, 2021 meeting of the Community Preservation Committee. I am Peter Pingatore, the chair, and I will confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. I will call your name, members first, and please respond in the affirmative. And we will do our usual. We'll go in alphabetical order. Mr. Alpert.
Here.
Mr. Barnes.
Here.
Mr. Crocker.
Here.
Mr. Dermody.
Here.
Ms. Dorfman.
Here.
Mr. Gersel.
Here.
Mr. Zambone.
Here.
And the chair is present. Karis Lustig. You can hear me? Okay. And Kristen Wright.
Here.
And I see we have our guests. Let's just make sure. Tony Delgazio.
Here.
You can hear us. And James Goldstein.
Here.
Okay, so we're here and everyone can hear me. This is an open meeting of the Community Preservation Committee. It is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public body are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. For this meeting, the Needham CPC is convening by Zoom app as posted on the town's website, along with the agenda for this evening's meeting. And it does identify how the public may join. Please note, members of the committee and other members who are going to be speaking, the meeting's being recorded and some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that you should take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. The meeting materials should have been provided to you ahead of time. Unless we note otherwise, those are the materials and the public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Ground rules. We will turn to our agenda. What I will do is we are going to have speakers and presentations. I'll introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members and I'll do it alphabetically, invite each one of you to make comments or questions. And just in order for the record to be clean, just make sure that either I or you identify yourself clearly on the record. And then mute your phone, mute your audio if it's not your turn to speak. Speak clearly. And then after we do our alphabetical report, then kind of raise your hand and we'll go from there to complete the discussion and any questions. Wait until I yield the floor to you. And remember that each vote is a roll call vote. And I'm sure that Kristen will remind us of same. So chairman's updates. There are none other than we do have a new president in case you've missed. Okay. Thought I'd help. All right, tonight we have proponents presentations. I think we're going out of order. We have FY 2202 as the first one, which is the town Needham marriage records. We're just changing things up a little bit because of some scheduling issues. And we're going to have the Fisher Street Trailhead fiscal year 2205 presentation being done first. This is, we had this proposal before us in either last year or the year before that. I can't remember when, and it had to do with the design funds. And I think that James Goldstein made the presentation then. This is now being done by the town. And so our town engineer will be making the presentation. Mr. Goldstein is here to answer any questions on behalf of, I guess it's our Bay State, if I have this right, Bay State Rail Trail. So with that, this makes sense to have Mr. Delgado. Do we have that right, Karis?
Yep.
Okay, so I don't see Tony though.
Nope,
We
he's
knew
on the
this.
panel.
I don't see him.
He is not visible, but
Oh.
Tony, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Oh, so he's gonna make the presentation that way. Okay, fine. Okay, from an undisclosed location.
Tony, would you like me to share my screen to put up the documents you sent me?
Yes, please.
All right. All right.
Excuse me, Karis, I think that's the wrong one. That's the one I sent you. Tony.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Hold on one second.
All right, again, you got to announce yourselves on the record. If that's James, is that James Goldstein?
Yes, I'm sorry,
Okay.
that was James Goldstein, but
Okay.
it was the wrong presentation.
Okay, that's fine.
Is it the plan, Tony, that you want me to put up?
Yes.
All right. Okay,
Thank you.
can you see that?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. So this project is to request $15,000 to construct the parking lot area, the trees, the 2 picnic tables, the handicap parking area, the driveway entrance, and the little walkway that's shown on this plan in order for us to purchase the materials, which is estimated about $15,000, and begin the first steps of this project. We're calling it the minimalist approach, to establish what's shown in here on this plan for the town to be able to construct this trailhead, or at least this portion of the trailhead. As shown on the plan, the red bubbled area is an area that has a turtle, kind of turtle refuge area, as identified by the Conservation Commission. So the amount of asphalt is minimalized. It's shown in a kind of a pink color at the entrance, right off of Fisher Street, and then the 2 parking areas at the opposite end of the parking area. The light blue are stone chips, similar to the stone chips that you see at Walker Gordon Pond or DeFazio parking lot. Same size chips, same construction, same method, but that's the area shown in blue, delineating where the stone chips would be. And finally, there's a kind of a small guardrail that goes around the parking area, not the driveway up to it, but the parking area itself, and has a couple openings for people to be able to get directly onto the trail, which is shown in gray, either from the parking lot directly to the trail or from the two handicap parking areas to the right, as shown on this plan, and then down to the trail to make that connection. The two picnic table areas are actually right opposite the two handicap parking spots. So that's essentially what our project is. It's simple. We have met, the DPW itself has met to try to coordinate all of the preparation work that would be needed in order to do this. And then assuming that the committee does approve the funds and it goes to town meeting, those funds would be available July 1st, 2021. And we would be able to purchase the materials and complete the project. With that, happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Tony. Well, why don't we go for, why don't we do this? Does James Goldstein have anything to add to that presentation? And then what we'll do is we'll go in alphabetical order and have the committee members ask questions and make comments. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you have anything to add, well, why don't we start with that?
That's fine. This is James Goldstein. Tony covered it well, I think. I'll just remind the committee of one point, which I think you may have mentioned, Peter, which is the CPC had granted $15,000 for design work previously. We have recently returned those funds to the CPC because Tony and his group did the design internally. And so it's the same, if you will, $15,000 that is now being requested for construction materials. Okay.
And if I can, just chairman's prerogative here, I'll go out of order because I have a question. My only question may be directed to you. Jim, does it go by, you go by Jim or James?
James, yes.
James?
Yes.
Okay. When the proposal that was made for the design funds, there was a suggestion that there could potentially be grant money available for the construction. So what happened to that? Is there grant money? And well, I guess, or well, I guess the question is, what happened to that? Is there grant money available for construction?
Yes, this is James Goldstein again. In theory, yes, the Mass Trails program provides funding for various trail-related investments. However, it's very competitive, and their criteria is more about connecting various trails as a priority and reaching communities and underserved populations. And this project is unlikely to be competitive in that program. I've spoken to the grants manager, Amanda Lewis, at length, both about this and another Needham Rail Trail project. And it's clear, I think, to me anyway, that this would unlikely receive Mass Trails funding.
Okay, so it's maybe available, but it's you made a decision. It's unlikely. Sounds like even highly unlikely.
I believe so.
Okay, I think that's my question. And now let's revert to our procedure, and we'll start going in alphabetical order to Paul Alpert. Questions?
Thank you. I originally was going to say that I didn't have any questions, but I'm noticing that the plan is stamped draft, and I'm just wondering whether we will have a final plan that's not a draft plan in time for our public hearing or in time for town meeting?
Mr. Chairman, shall I answer that?
Yes, that's for you, Tony.
This plan is stamped draft because we haven't actually started the project yet. The draft will be removed and it will be stamped and signed once we begin. The first step in this process is for the engineering division to go out and actually provide construction layout of this proposed constructed area. So we would go out and lay out the stakes and so forth, so that the other DPW divisions would be able to come in and begin their preparation work. The preparation work being, cleaning out weeds, grading the area, a little bit of excavation. And when we go to do that, actually before we go to do that, this plan will be stamped and signed with a correct date.
Well, then the only thing that comes to mind is town meeting will probably want to know that when the plan is finalized, there won't be any changes that will require any additional funds or something.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, Mr. Delgado, why don't you answer that? I guess what we're trying to, what we try to do a lot on the committee is anticipate questions that are going to happen on the floor. So that's an expressed concern and comment. I don't know how you should respond to that other than take that under consideration.
Yeah, when you prepare your presentation for town meeting, because it sounds like it's still going to be a draft plan at the time of town meeting.
Mr. Chairman, no, it'll be stamped and signed before this material gets presented for town meeting.
Okay, good.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, I'm all set, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question here. Is this a finishing touch on the rail trail? Is this the last project that will complete the work of the rail trail, or as we go forward, do you anticipate other needs as you move further down the trail toward Needham?
Mr. Delgado, do you feel comfortable responding to that, or should that
Sure.
be? Okay, go ahead.
No, as I mentioned, we're calling this the minimalist plan. This establishes those elements that I described, the basic elements, puts them in place, but is not intended to be the end of this trailhead. There are plans being discussed for a storybook trail, perhaps a playground area, and other elements. There's possibility of putting a sign similar to the one that's at the ADA trail around the reservoir. So there are other elements that can be added to this, and there's plenty of room to do it. It's just a factor of what do those elements look like and how much money is available to construct them.
The reason I ask is, can we anticipate that you will be coming back to CPC for additional funding as this project continues to move on?
I think I'd have to let James Goldstein answer that question.
Okay, this is James. For the trailhead itself, I think the additional elements that Tony mentioned would likely have other funding sources. Just as an example, my understanding is that the library is in the process of writing a grant for federal funds under the CARE Act for the storybook walk. So that's one element. But if I might, there's a whole nother project, a much larger project on the other end of the rail trail that we hope to accomplish over the next couple of years. And that is the extension of the trail to Chestnut Street. And you may or may not know, but last year there was a feasibility study conducted and 4 options laid out. It has a large price tag, and those options are being reviewed and considered now by DPW and the Bay Colony Rail Trail Association and other stakeholders, I believe. It's unclear to me anyway what sources would be sought to pay for that. It's possible, I think, that CPC could be one of those sources, but it's fairly far off because there's a whole design process that has to happen first, going from the conceptual design to a final design with permitting and engineering. And Tony and I actually spoke about this earlier today. We are likely to apply for one of those Mass Trails grants for that, because that is a priority, to connect to commuter rail and to connect to the downtown area, at least close to it along Chestnut Street. So that's a much larger project down the road, and it is possible we would come back in conjunction with the town, of course, for CPC funding.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Crocker.
Just curious, perhaps I missed this, and I apologize if I did. Just on the trees, just curious what type of trees they're going to be in, and what size is initially going to be planted.
Mr. Chairman, I have spoken with Ed Olson, the superintendent of the Park and Forestry, and also our tree warden. And the trees will be coming from our nursery, or will be donated in some fashion through Eversource. And the specific type of trees he will select depending on what options that we have available. Right now, we don't know, but what we do know is that there will be 5 trees, and they'll be planted in the areas that are shown on this plan.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. Yeah, that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Dermody.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for the presentation. I understand the cost being requested is around $15,000. Is there a breakdown as to what components cost what? Like how much for asphalt, how much for stone chips, how much for trees? Or maybe more simply, what's the biggest ticket out of that 15,000, please?
The biggest ticket item I would say would be the guardrail. That's actually estimated at $7,500.
Wow.
And then the stone chips and the asphalt make up the other $7,500. The trees are expected to be donated. The picnic tables are coming from the Park and Forestry division. And let's see. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Tony. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dorfman.
Hi, thank you. I have no questions. It looks like a great project.
Okay, Mr. Crystal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tony, great job on this. The only question I have is my ears perked up when you said the proposed stone chip driveway is similar to what we have at DeFazio. As you know, with the traffic patterns going through there, we have to drag that parking lot quite often just because you're getting holes and dips. And I know it's a different volume of cars that would be in there, but do you expect that you're going to have to drag that stone chip driveway every other year at the beginning of each season or something along those lines?
Yes, we are aware that there's a higher maintenance requirement with this type of surfacing. Unfortunately, we have to do it this way because of the turtle refuge area. We also have an understanding with the Conservation Commission that we will not substantially increase impervious areas. So that is why the light blue area within the bubble, which is the turtle refuge, and then the main parking lot, except for the two handicap parking spaces, which must be paved, are composed of the Olson chips.
Okay, great. I mean, I assume that was what the project was, so thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Zambone, do you have questions, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple small ones. Are these turtles endangered, or are they just regular box turtles?
No, they're not endangered. They're not an endangered species. It's just that this area was noted for turtles because they've been seen in this area, and the Conservation Commission, when we constructed the actual rail trail itself, which is shown in gray on this plan, when we constructed that, they wanted us to take note of and use more sensitive construction methods within this area.
Okay. And my next question, Mr. Chair, might be falling outside the four corners of this particular subject matter, but it was mentioned, I think in response to Mr. Barnes's question, that we've got a bigger project that people are eyeing to connect up with Chestnut Street. I'm just curious, can we get a sense of the order of magnitude of dollars? You said it was much bigger. I mean, is this, we're talking 50,000, 500,000, a million? What kind of monies are we talking about down the road?
Mr. Chairman, that's a very difficult question to answer. There are several options that are available from the feasibility study. So we're not sure which one that we're going to pursue yet. There will be discussions throughout the course of 2021 to try to decide on what it is that we would like to construct. But if you want to get an order of magnitude, I would say it'd be closer to the $500,000 range.
But that's, I mean, it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of an unfair question because we really don't even know the scope of what it is that the
Yeah,
work.
no, Mr. Chair, just so that you know, I was asking because I'm trying to think a little bit ahead about what kind of funds are we going to have available for future projects, and I'm not sure, where we're going to be at that point in time. I'm just trying to, in my own mind, get a sense of what this ongoing budget is going to be looking like if we add in another.
All right. That's okay. Fair enough. Okay. All right. I just don't want people to feel pinned down, and I don't want to, feed the rumor mill, if you will. But that's okay. That's good. Fair enough. All right. Any other questions, Rick?
Sorry, no.
Okay. All right. Mr. Delgado, thank you for the presentation. I have no additional questions. I'm wondering, are you presenting on behalf of the town for the town reservoir sediment removal?
I believe I am, yes.
All right, so why don't we just keep you in the hot seat? We're going to go a little bit out of order. Unfortunately, that means our town clerk gets pushed back a little bit. Is that okay, Karis? Or no? Otherwise, Tony,
Tony, are you okay with holding on? Because I do know the town clerk did ask me what time she was going.
Okay, all right, fine. All right, Tony, do you feel comfortable? You're okay sitting here listening to another presentation, and then we'll go back to you?
Sure.
Right? Okay, fine. Then let's go with, all right. So, excuse me a minute. Okay. All right, so our next presentation is preservation of town of Needham marriage records, and that's being presented by our town clerk, Teddy Eaton.
I promoted her over. Teddy, can you, are you able to unmute or,
Yes, I am.
you are?
I'm
Okay, just
sorry.
want to make sure.
This
I have
is
a question. Karis, do you have the questions that I had put together? I don't know if they ever made it to the committee members. It kind of, I sent it out late, immediately prior to our preceding meeting, and I just don't know if we ever forwarded them. But if not, we'll just,
I think they went over, I think Teddy provided written answers to those questions.
He
And I
did.
think that was
I
distributed.
did.
so what, did the committee get those?
I believe I sent it out yesterday.
Oh, great. Okay, good. All right, good. All right,
Are you ready?
we're ready.
Okay, okay. I also asked Bruce Cadman, who is our general code vendor, to be here in case there were any technical questions. And I have a question for Karis, having not done this before. Do you have the pictures that I
Yep, I can
sent?
put it up on my screen and just let me know what you want me to go to.
Well, you can probably put them up anytime, the first three, or one at a time, right?
Yep, let me just get the right.
Would you like me to start while you're working on that?
Yes, that would be great.
Oh.
Thank you.
First, I would like to thank the Community Preservation Committee for its past support of a previous project dating back to 2012, in which CPC approved the restoration of mostly original pre-1900 birth, marriage intentions, death records, and pauper records of the 1800s that for some reason were never incorporated into annual volumes, as well as the 1700 to 1800 vital records found in an old wooden box located in the town hall. CoFile at that time restored, deacidified, and bound many of our earliest books. To date, we have restored close to 30 volumes of the town books and vital ledger volumes out of the town clerk's budget. I did have a couple of pictures of these. The first one being the original birth, marriage, and death certificates from 1800 to 1900, plus several miscellaneous records dating back to the 1700s and 1800s, as well as digital negative originals of these records. And that would be shown, if you can rotate it, that would be great. These are bound volumes of birth, marriages, and deaths from 1700 to 1800. If anyone ever can get into the town hall, they really did a magnificent job, and they are beautiful. And I'm very proud of them. The next photo is basically a comparison of the town of Needham's first two volumes of birth, marriage, and death certificates. Volume 1 dated 1701/1711 to 1801, and volume 1 and 2 transcript of those of the same time frame. And all these the blue books, they're all, each article is encapsulated into Mylar so as to preserve it even further than what it was originally done. So hopefully they'll last for a long time. The third photograph is the large wooden box I mentioned earlier that we found in the lower town hall vault, containing envelope after envelope of loose original vitals. And those are incorporated into the previous pictures that I showed. So that's the past proposal. The current proposal is a little different in scope. City and town clerks are agent for the Massachusetts State Department of Vital Statistics and the recipients of their community's vital records. After many years of underfunded budgets, this State Department was finally able to begin the process of creating a statewide electronic program of the state's births beginning in 2011 and death records beginning in 2014. This meant that city and town clerks statewide could electronically receive the original birth and death records for their communities and provide certified copies for their residents. Each city and town retains the original vital record, which we currently bind annually, and now we enclose them in Mylar for a more permanent protection. Because the State Department of Vital Statistics is currently working with both the current birth and death records going forward, as well as moving backward, There are no plans at the present to begin any work on the state's marriage records. This year's request is to scan, index, and digitize the marriage records of the town of Needham. If you can look in the upper left-hand corner, that's where the 1919 marriage records begin. And that top row, they're getting very frail and very fragile. These records will be uploaded onto a content management system where we can then create certified copies of the original documents without going to our antiquated card system or to the original certificates themselves. We have received a combined estimate from 2 reliable firms under state contract to conduct this work. I have attached the general code image data graphic to show how these 2 vendors work together to ensure success of this part of the project. This graphic depicts to some degree the process of moving from a paper-based environment to a digital platform like the state's birth and death electronic system. The goal of the project is to protect the historical significance of the records by minimizing the number of times these records are handled by staff, as well as the potential for damage due to fire or flood, God forbid. The software will enable immediate access to the records, which will help ensure a high level of customer care for those who need the legal documents, reducing the amount of time needed to fulfill this task. This new software will allow staff to enter marriage records directly into the system, which we plan to do, with approval from CPC, going maybe from 1919 up to maybe 1970 for 50 years. Then going forward, we will scan ourselves and update this on a continual basis without having to come back to CPC for further funding. The total cost for the project, based on the Laserfeast configuration detailed in the proposal, not including any of the options listed, will be to scan, index, process, and upload the marriage records into the Laserfeast repository. And the costs are as followed. The Laserfeast cost will be approximately $13,000. The back file will be approximately $13,000, and a total cost of about $26,000. The annual Laserfeast software maintenance, LSAP, Laserfeast software assurance plan, beginning in the second year going forward, based on the configuration in the proposal, will be $1,500 annually and will be incorporated into the town clerk's annual budget. The initial work will be done by general code and image data. However, going forward, the town clerk staff will be able to enter marriage certificates into the software program, which will keep the marriage records of the town electronically updated, as well as the retention of the original marriage certificates. I have attached, I think that's the picture you see now is the marriage certificates, the bound volumes beginning in 1919. And if you look down to the second row and at the very end of the red volumes, you'll see a larger volume. Beginning in 2001, all vital records for the town are bound annually and encapsulated in Mylar to further protect our records from deterioration. And I think there might be 2 more. That's another black and white, very similar. I couldn't, if you can you, yeah, nah. That's the, again, those are the records, marriage records I'm talking about, with the top row being the beginning 1919. And the next 2 pages basically show the process of scanning, indexing, and digitizing the documents. I believe those are included, so everybody should have a copy of those documents. Thank you. If I can answer any questions, I would be glad to at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Eaton. What we will do is we'll follow our usual drill, and we'll go through and identify committee members by name. We'll go in alphabetical order, and you can ask questions or make comments, beginning with Mr. Albert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no questions or comments, just that it looks like a very worthwhile project. And thank you for the presentation.
Okay, Mr. Barnes.
Yes, thank you, Teddy, for the presentation. A couple of quick, very minor questions. Is it fair to say that from a practical point of view, if one were to go into the town clerk's office after this project is completed and looking for a marriage certificate, one of your workers would be able to press a button and print it out almost seamlessly. Is that right?
That's what we hope to do.
Okay.
And that's what we've now started to begin to do with our birth and marriage records, birth
Okay.
and death records.
All right. The second question, you have done birth, you've done death, you've done marriage. Are there other records, any other vital records that you anticipate that you're going to have to secure for a long term and digitize going forward?
No, because my understanding from the vendor is that once the initial project is completed, then there will be training so that the town clerk's office and staff will be trained to be able to digitize those records ourselves.
So any other type of vital record, I can't even imagine what they might be, but if you did come up with something, there would be something that the workers you have would be able to do on their own, you figure?
I'm not sure how to answer that. As I said earlier, I've tried to restore one volume of various records every year. And there are selectmen records going back to the 17 and 1800s. There's a one tax volume, treasurer's book that goes back. We have page after page of personal mortgages. Those are in pretty good condition. We never touch them. They're in the vault.
Town meeting presentations, things like that. I'm wondering, will that be?
Town meeting, those are incorporated into the annual town report each year.
Okay,
So
they're not digitized, not that you'd have to.
well,
but-
some of the selectmen's records do include the town clerk's records, which are the town meeting and the elections of each year. And that goes way back into the 1800s.
Okay, okay. Great, thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
all, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Mr. Crocker.
No questions except for just a comment. Wonderful thing to do because, if we don't save them, they're gone. And once they're gone, there's no going back. There's no coming back from that. So thank you, Teddy. Appreciate the effort.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Dermody.
Yes, good evening. Thanks, Teddy. If you mentioned it, I might have missed it, but how long do you expect this to take, this project?
I would estimate it would probably be maybe 3 months.
Oh, wow, that's terrific. Okay, great. Yeah, all for it. Looks like a good service for everybody in town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Dorfman.
Hi, and thank you. I think it's a great project as well. When can this start? Is there an issue with COVID now, or does that have to be put off at all, or?
I don't think COVID would deter it, but it wouldn't certainly start until after town meeting. It would probably be July 1st, or the beginning of July.
Regardless of, like,
Right.
the COVID wouldn't limit it.
I don't know. We are in my office every day. We are socially distanced, and the doorbell just never stops ringing. They keep coming.
I'm
If
sure.
they have an appointment, they're fine. If they don't, they want to come anyway. They need this, they need that, they need the other thing. So we try and handle them all.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Actually, Teddy, seeing you there during our darkest days was been oddly reassuring. Let me just say that, okay?
Thank you.
But thank you so much for the work you've done and you continue to do. Okay, Mr. Gerstle.
No questions at this time, but thank you for the presentation, Teddy.
Thank
And
you.
Mr. Zimbo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Teddy, great job again, as always. Just a curiosity question more than anything. How often do you get requests for some of these rather older 1900 type records?
We don't get those requests as often as we do the more current records, but you do have people that are trying to do ancestry, and they're looking records. They want to see when their great uncle was born and when they died and if they got married. So we do get some, but we honestly they are not as much as the newer records.
Okay, all right, just curious. Thank you.
Teddy, thank you for your presentation. And I just want to apologize because we only had a total of probably 6 minutes of conversation over the last 60 days, just been, and it's all on my part. And so again, I apologize.
Apology
And-
accepted.
Okay, so the
You were
questions that
very
I have
busy.
are probably something that I could have asked you offline, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So just, this is really mostly in points of clarification. For this request, we are going to take several volumes, whatever it is, it might be 90. I think there's a number somewhere, whatever they are, 90 books or something like that. And those consist of marriage records from 1919 going forward, correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
they're going to be scanned and digitized and put up in this document management system, okay?
correct.
So now, but we have this other population of marriage records, which were prior to that. And what my question is, those have been restored, those are in good shape, either in bound volumes or CDs, or are the bound volumes also copied in CD?
I believe they are. I think that's the first picture I showed you.
Okay, so that's all, I just want to clarify that, which is the bound volumes that we see are also in CD format.
Yes,
So we're going to be able to access all of these records through some sort of digital format.
correct. But
Okay.
plus we have the originals
Oh, yeah. I
in the
understand.
bound volumes. The problem with the 17 and 1800s, they're very difficult to read. They were handwritten in a script that none of us use anymore. If we get them, we prefer to say to the people, we'd rather you got an original, a photocopy of it than us trying to prepare it electronically, because we have trouble reading some of the wording.
Okay. And so is it the case so that we're going to end up kind of with like two different systems? Because if you're prior to 1919 and you want to access it, your options are, well, always the bound volume.
Yes,
And the CDs. Is that right?
correct.
And if it's 1919 forward, your options are bound volumes and this document management system.
Correct.
Okay. So it's kind of begs the question, is there any way to merge the two? Do we know?
I do not know. I don't know if Bruce Cadman is attending, he might be able to answer your question.
Probably could do that for a fee.
No, he would be,
No.
no, he would be
No,
very
I meant, I
willing
don't
to-
mean to ask the question. I mean,
Oh.
I meant like,
Oh, I'm sure it would be a fee, yes.
yeah, it would be. So I'm just curious about that. And I guess, listen, we're just the reviewers, but I just wanted to clarify that for the committee. But now I think I understand exactly where we're going to end up with. But we still are going to end up with digitized records, but in somewhat different format, depending on the year. Is that,
Correct.
and I
Yes.
see, okay. Have I said that correctly? Is this, okay. All right. Great presentation. Those are my questions. And okay, Laura, any other questions from the committee? We see Laura Dorfman's hand is up.
I'm sorry, one more question, Teddy. Though the records after 1919 that would be, digitized and available, would they ever be available online, or does someone have to go into the town hall to request it? Those and any other vital records.
Part of the income from the town clerk's office is the sale of vital records. We charge $15 for each certified copy. That's one issue.
Can you charge it online? Could you charge that fee online?
If they can get it online, how do we charge it? I'm not sure of that.
Yeah, I understand.
The other even more important problem is that we have impounded records in our files, and they're intermingled with other regular records, and those are not open to the public. So that
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, great. Thank you, Teddy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing me to bring the presentation forward.
Okay, great presentation. All right. Okay, We are now on to our third presentation for the evening. And that is the town reservoir sediment removal. And it is our town engineer, again, making the presentation, Mr. Doug Asa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Karis, if you could bring up the map of the reservoir.
Sure, hold on one second. This one?
No, it's the survey map. That's the photo. Yep, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This project is very similar to the Rosemary Lake project in what the town has to address. In Needham, there are 5 Category 5 water bodies. Category 5 is the most impaired water bodies. The first one that we did was Rosemary Lake, and that feeds Rosemary Brook, which is the first Category 5 water body. This reservoir feeds Alder Brook, which is the second Category 5 water body that the town is required to address. The third water body is Fuller Brook, which is near Wellesley. It's off of Great Plain Avenue. And the fourth and fifth are 2 different sections of the Charles River, one being from the town of Wellesley down to, I believe it's the Chestnut Street, and then from Chestnut Street around the rest of the perimeter of Needham up to Newton. Those 2 sections, very recently, within the past 2 weeks, were given a grade of A from the Charles River Watershed Association, meaning that they've been cleaned up. As the town continues its efforts to clean up stormwater, the discharges into the Charles River are improved, and that is how the Charles River has been given a grade of A for both sections, I might say. Now, the reservoir project is part sediment removal and part water quality improvements. The reservoir is impaired by priority organics, low dissolved oxygen, sediment, turbidity, and I think there's one more that I can't recall off the top of my head, but it's what it's doing is essentially from the fertilizers and so forth that are getting into the stormwater runoff, going into the reservoir, then causes to grow plants and contribute to the discharge, which goes under Dedham Avenue and into Fuller Brook, which then of course discharges into the Charles River. So what this project is for the design of a way to address the impairments to the reservoir. Karis, can you go to the photograph? So on the left-hand side of this, you can see there's a there is a kind of like a sandbar, which is coming from one of the brooks, which are going through the wetlands between DeFazio and the reservoir. Excuse me. That sand actually has to be removed. There's no other way around it. We actually do have to go in there and remove that sediment. The rest of the reservoir, however, where we are hoping that we will not have to dredge the rest of the reservoir. The project that we went through for Rosemary was truly an extraordinary effort and very, very difficult to implement. It was successful. However, if there's any way that we could avoid having to do that for the reservoir, that's what we want to do. So during this design effort, we're going to take a look at the entire watershed area that discharges into the reservoir and see if there are any other methods to control that that storm water that's going into the reservoir. You can imagine the upstream area, which is largely the golf course, and the discharge from those little ponds that are in there, and the town's drainage system, which goes uphill from the intersection of Great Plain and Broad Meadow Road, which is feeding into the reservoir. And as I mentioned, the other area, which is coming between DeFazio itself and the reservoir through that wetland area. So we're looking, we want to figure out if there's some other way of improving the water quality. And if we can, find a way that's sufficient to address that, then we will not have to dredge the entire reservoir. Now, the dredging project is currently estimated at about $2 million. I think it's $2 to $2.2 million if we had to dredge the entire thing. We're hoping that we can find another way, such as discussing other methods of maintaining the grass at the golf course and the fairways and so forth, installing water quality systems that are up gradient of that. As I was mentioning, Broad Meadow Road and points uphill from there. If we can infiltrate or provide water quality tanks or swales or whatever we have to do to clean up the stormwater coming into the reservoir, that would be preferred. That's what we would prefer to do. It is much less expensive. We cannot estimate what the expense will be because we don't know what systems would have to be installed. However, just based on the town installing these systems, which we've been doing now for a while, compared to the dredging cost, it's substantially less. The project is one of those projects that is being forced upon us by the EPA. they, you know, they require that we clean up the water that's going into those impaired water bodies. And this is really the second project on our list that we have to tackle. We discovered a lot of new information when we constructed the ADA trail that goes around the reservoir. So we think that there's a very good chance that we will be able to avoid having to dredge the entire reservoir. So that's what this funding, that's what the reason why we're seeking this funding. It will improve the reservoir, it will improve the recreation of it. As some of you may know, the reservoir is stocked with fish, typically on an annual basis. And so the wildlife and the swans that you see, the otters, which have decided to come to visit, and a variety of other wildlife, turtles and so forth and so on, which exist around. If you've never walked the ADA trail, I highly recommend that you do. It's only a half mile. It's a nice walk, very easy, and you can actually see all the wildlife. It's surprising. At least it was to me. I didn't think there was such a variety of it, but it's definitely something to take in if you ever get the chance. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Mr. Chairman?
Sorry about that. I was looking for the mute button. All right. Thank you, Mr. Delgado. So we will follow our drill and we'll go in alphabetical order, and I will announce, or you or the committee member will announce his or her name. We'll start with Mr. Alpert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tony, good to talk with you again. I was going to say it's good to see you, but I can't see you because you're not videoed. So just to reiterate a bit, this is the design phase that we're funding now, and then you'll be back to us for the cost of the actual project, which sounds like it will have a cap of about 2.2 million based on current estimates, and could be substantially less. And so my question beyond that is, once this project is complete, is it fair to say that you will not be coming back to us for Rosemary or for this area in the future, or certainly not in anywhere near future for further funding for those two areas? And it sounds like you won't need CPC funding to clean up Fuller Brook or the Charles River, that this might be the end of the need to come to CPC for the cleaning up of these five category 5 areas. Is that a fair statement, Tony?
With one exception, we may have to come to you for Fuller Brook.
Okay.
We've addressed Rosemary Brook. This is going to address Alder Brook. And so we have Fuller Brook next up on our list. The good news is the two sections of the Charles River were recently given a grade of A. If that stays, if it doesn't, go lower, then we will not have to do anything for those two sections of the Charles River. And I'm very hopeful. I can tell you that, way back when, it was a D, it was given a grade of D. As improvements were made within the town for the water that's going into the Drowse River, the grade went up to a C and then vacillated back and forth between C and B. And it did that for a few years. This is the first time that I've seen it go to an A. So it's very possible that it could go, from A to B to A to B for a few years, with it finally settling on A once more and more stormwater projects are instituted, actually constructed within the town. So I'm hoping this is number 2, and Fuller Brook, may be number 3. I have to say may instead of will, because the town has been undertaking stormwater projects all over the place. And with the institution of the new stormwater general bylaw, as houses get reconstructed and more dry wells are installed, the water quality will continue to improve. So I can't tell you for sure whether or not we'll have to come back to you for Fuller Brook. But at this point, I would say it looks like it's going to be Rosemary Brook, which is already done, Alder Brook, which we're proposing now, and Fuller Brook in the future.
Okay, so I'd like to get a sense of timing. So this design phase is for fiscal year 22. Is it fair to say that you'll be coming back to us for the funding for the project for fiscal year 23, or possibly 24? And then when do you anticipate, if you do need to come back to us for Fuller Brook, when do you think that will be?
Well, as it stands right now, I can tell you what our capital improvement program is. We are looking for construction money next fiscal year. And then the year after that, there would be a design phase for Fuller Brook. And then the following year after that would be the construction phase for Fuller Brook.
So you're going to be looking for funding now then for fiscal years 22 through 2025. Okay, thank you. I think that covers all of my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alpert. Okay, Mr. Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tony, for the presentation. Although the title of this application is sediment removal at the reservoir, it sounds like it's a much more complex and involved study that this design plan is going to call for. If the design money is to remove the sediment in a part of the reservoir, it appears as though what you're looking for is more looking at other solutions. You talked about the golf course, you talked about the area between DeFazio and the reservoir. It sounds like there are a lot of other sources here that need to be addressed as part of the design. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, the title is sediment, but I think reality is that there are a lot of different branches on this tree that you'll have to be looking at in order to try to find a solution to address the problem, right?
Yes, that's the approach that we would like to take, because we would like to avoid having to dredge the entire reservoir.
Okay, okay. Just so I have a concept in my mind here of what the design money is for. It's for a small part will be sediment, but there's a greater piece here that they're going to be contributing factors that causes the sediment in the reservoir. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tony.
Okay, Mr. Crocker.
Yes, Tony, just confirmation on something you were talking about, let's call it the sandbar, if you will. And I think you partially referred to this, talking about the phasio, but is that the sediment that in essence is coming from the field? Is that when the pipe, let's say springs a leak and the sediment flows down into the pipe? And because we were talking about that related to this project coming before CPC being funded, is there is sediment being discharged into the reservoir because of those leaks in the pipe. So is a lot of it related to that, or is there some other relationship, or how do we stop that from happening in the future? That's where the question lies. Where's it coming from? How do we stop it?
It is one of the sources of the sediment. I would say the main source was the DeFazio parking lot before we had put down those stone chips. Because every time it rained, you could actually see the mud washing right into the reservoir.
Wow.
The construction of that stone chip area, which I'm sure you're all aware, was extended actually all the way down to the reservoir. The initial part was up by the parking lot area, and then we added more stone chips going down because it did a fantastic job at trapping the sediment and preventing it from moving on. So I would say that that would have been the primary source, and then the sinkholes that were developing in the athletic field that were going where the dirt was going into the pipe and then entering the reservoir. I would say that probably is another source. And I would say it's I'd say it's a I don't know if I'd call it significant, but I'd say it's definitely a good source. And then the third would be the upgradient contributing areas from the town's drainage system. So I'd say all those three contribute to that.
As far as this, let's call it the size of the sandbar, I don't remember when the DeFazio parking lot was done with a stone, but is there any sense of what's changed over time when that parking lot was done, as far as how quickly this, let's call it the sandbar, increases in size? Can you give us any sense of that? If you can't, okay.
Well, I've been working for Needham for 29 years, so I can tell you, I've personally seen the sediment going right into the reservoir during rainstorms. And it's not just, it wasn't just a little amount of sediment, it was a lot of sediment. In fact, you can even see, some of the ducks and the geese and the swans, you can see them actually standing on the sandbar. It's just below the water level. And it's been accumulating there for as long as I've been here. And probably even before, I would say definitely before me as well. So there's decades of accumulation where that sandbar is.
And so I suppose it's also fair to say that the sediment didn't just stop at the sandbar. It's in the reservoir in general. It's just simply in the reservoir. It isn't just at the sandbar.
Yeah, one of the impairments is to the reservoir is sediment and turbidity. So the sediment are the heavier particles that enter the reservoir and basically sink to the bottom, and the turbidity are those lighter particles that cloud the water. They stay in solution.
Is there anything at all that you would say to us that the town should look at or further change in the future to stop this from getting into the reservoir? I mean, the parking lots should be taken care of, the field should be taken care of, the sinkholes, when we get that fixed, hopefully that'll be fixed. Is there anything at all that the town could possibly do to stop this from affecting any further affection of the reservoir?
Well, yes. The town has a permit, a 5-year permit from the EPA, which requires us to install water quality structures and implement best management practices to essentially clean out the drainage system and keep it clean. So for example, I'll just give you one example. Catch basins. So each catch basin, which are those, in the street, you'll see a grate, has a sump. And that sump collects debris from the street, sand, leaves, trash, other sources. And those catch basins have to be put on a regular cleaning schedule, so to speak, because if the sumps get filled up, then that debris and sediment and so forth just travels through the pipe. It's no longer trapped, and it will discharge into whatever water body it's aimed at. So that would be an example of like how to address removing the sediment and leaves, by the way, because phosphorus, that was the other one. Phosphorus is another impairment. That would be another way of addressing the removal of those sediments and impairments.
And phosphorus, I take it you're referring to people's lawns. At least I think you're mostly referring to people's lawns and a fertilizer flowing down. And I take it the phosphorus is not something where the sumps, where it could be filtered out in those sump areas, that it is going to flow no matter what. It is going to flow to the reservoir.
That I love that question. The shortest way I can answer it is, a lot of people think that phosphorus comes from the fertilizers that people put on their lawns, but phosphorus has been largely banned in Massachusetts. Typically, the only way you can get phosphorus is from what's called a starter fertilizer, and those starter fertilizers have phosphorus in them. But regular fertilizer that you would put on your lawn does not. And so it is not the primary source of phosphorus. The primary source of phosphorus is leaves from trees. That's the primary source of phosphorus. So if you can imagine, in the sumps where leaves do accumulate and the water goes in there, it kind of steeps, if you will, kind of like tea. And the water becomes a kind of either a tan or a brownish color as the phosphorus leaches out of the leaves and into the water. So regular cleaning of those sumps will decrease the amount of phosphorus at the discharge point.
Oh, thank you, Tony. Very interesting. So, so the town has something that I don't know if the town is keeping up with it, but there is something the town can do to increase the quality of the water, clarity. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Crocker. Mr. Dermody.
Good evening. Thank you for the presentation, Tony. A couple of quick questions. One is a curious question. What's the deepest depth of the reservoir?
It's about 6 feet.
Okay, thanks. And then the sediment, is it fair to say that some sediments are natural and some are contaminated? I think that word was used in there.
Well, we're trying to get away from the word contaminant. We use the word impaired.
Okay. I guess what I'm getting at is how, if they are they toxic, I guess? Let me just ask that.
No.
Okay.
That's why we're trying to get away from the word of contaminant. It's an impairment. It is something that occurs even if we human beings did not exist. It is something that occurs naturally, but the natural way it occurs at a significantly slower pace,
right,
than development.
I think the reservoir would be just fine if we weren't here. So it's this funding is primarily to remove the impaired sediments, and this, just so I'm clear, the funding is to spend money to figure out how to best do that process. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great, then let's do it. No further questions.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Dorfman.
Hi, and thank you so much. Just a couple of questions. So this is similar to the Rosemary Lake dredging project, would you say? Yeah, I think you did say that, Tony, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of design, so when that design was done, that was a long time ago, I think 2016, it was $118,000. And now this is a request for $262,000. Is that just because of time passed and things being more expensive, or is there a different, any differences there? And
Why don't you
another
let's ask him an open-ended question. Why is it twice as much?
The
Well,
area,
okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the area that we're looking at here is significantly larger. We are going to be looking at numerous ways that we could use to try to improve the water quality in the reservoir. The Rosemary Lake project, we had already addressed the inputs going into Rosemary Lake. Those were addressed through several projects. The infiltration basin that's in the Rosemary Pool parking lot, the Lake Drive discharge with the riprap and the deep sumps, and several other projects that we were pursuing prior to cleaning up the reservoir. So it was, the lake. So it was, the area was more limited. This is a much larger evaluation, if you will. It includes the subwatershed area that is immediately surrounding the reservoir itself. It deals with the golf course because it's a major contributor to the impairments. And then the upstream or up gradient area from the intersection of Great Plain Avenue and Broad Meadow going up the hill, Tudor Road, and it's a huge area. So if we are to find another way to address the impairments in the reservoir, it's going to be quite a large study area. Otherwise, we're looking at another dredging project, and that's quite frankly something that I really would like to avoid.
Thank you. Peter, I just have one more question, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Laura, I didn't mean to interrupt, or I should not have interrupted.
No, you're fine. You're fast tracking it. So just one more question. Do you anticipate using the same design consultant for this project that you used for Rosemary Lake?
Well, probably. I can't say absolutely at this point, but it probably will be the same consultant. That consultant is Beta Group. They actually, way back when, did the drainage map for the town. And so they already have most of the information. Whereas if we were to go hire a different consultant, they would have to start from scratch. So I would say it's very, very likely that we would use the same consultant.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura. Mr. Gerstle.
Tony, another great job, and thank you very much for the report. I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball for this question. Very similar to the Rosemary project, that if this does get done, do you think any of the Reservoir Trail will have to be disturbed or stopped or used as a staging area, similar to what we did over at Rosemary? And if so, I assume that would be replaced back to its natural or the way it was. But would you also anticipate that the trail itself probably would be closed down if you have to shut down a certain section of the trail?
The only thing that I can think of is the removal of that sandbar, because we would have to get in there. We would have to bring equipment in, and so that would definitely, I think, affect a small section of the trail. And yes, that would absolutely be replaced. Is this, just replaced just like it was before any disturbance. Mm-hmm. But the only way to get rid of that sandbar is to actually physically go in there and dig it out. Mm-hmm. Other than that, there shouldn't be any other disturbances to the ADA trail or any of the areas around the reservoir. I'm talking specifically the wetland areas that as you're going around, if you walk the trail, you can see they're right up next to in fact, they come right up to the trail. Whether it be a boardwalk or it be concrete or it be stone dust. So I don't see those areas as having to be disturbed, because what we would be doing is, for example, changing the practices of the golf course to maintain its grass areas, and implementing stormwater solutions that, quite frankly, are uphill of that. So it's kind of like nipping it in the bud,
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Tony. I appreciate that.
Okay, Mr. Gerstle, Mr. Zambone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tony, thank you. I feel it's appropriate for me to let the committee know that I am currently the president of the Needham Golf Club. And while I was in prior responsibilities and jobs that I volunteered for and took on at the golf club, one of the things that I worked on was helping to initiate the golf club in getting their Audubon certification for the club as a golf club. And that included a number of steps and items taken with respect to the use of fertilizer and pesticides and creating barriers and also doing a lot of water quality testing on the site. So I am a little bit familiar with that. So let me just give you a couple pieces of information which you may or may not know. There are 4 retention ponds on the golf course and 1 stream that flows across the property. The 4 retention ponds get their input from off the site. One of the ponds gets its input from drainage coming down off of Bird's Hill through Broad Meadow and down underground into the property. Another one comes from the MBTA parking lot at Hershey Station. The stormwater drainage flows into one of the ponds. There's a third source, which is a runoff of the stormwater that comes into the property on the opposite the property on Harris Avenue, near the corner of Harris Avenue and Great Plain. That feeds into a stream that flows across the property into a retention pond. And then from there, that stream flows down into the reservoir. Number of years ago, and in preparation for the Audubon study and the certification, we took water samples of water entering the retention ponds and leaving the retention ponds before they left the property. And we've got all those records available. And I would suggest, Tony, when your consultant gets involved in this, they may want to use some of that data to help identify where some of the issues are that you're going to be dealing with. Second piece of information which you ought to be aware of is we're currently contemplating a study to begin next year where we would capture a lot of the runoff that occurs coming into the property and on the property, and increasing the size of the retention ponds, and then using those retention ponds as the supply for a water sprinkler system. So that's under study. It would also include drilling of a well, or a couple wells on the property to feed those ponds, as well as other water collection properties. So I think, just by way of background, as you get into the design or before you get into the design, I just suggest that you may want to give me a call and we can sit down. Hopefully we'll all be vaccinated by then. And we can talk about some of the data that we have and what our plans are, and somehow perhaps dovetail them with what you are thinking about with respect to some of the items you discussed about upstream mitigation. So I just throw that out so that if you weren't aware of it, you are now.
Thank you. I would love to discuss this with you. I absolutely would love to do that. I am familiar with the water quality testing and so forth. I do get those reports. Very familiar with the golf course and the existing systems that are there. And I think that that's a fantastic idea. I wasn't aware of the golf course trying to use the water from the ponds for irrigation. But if you can do that, I think that would help a lot. I think that that's a fantastic idea. I'd love to talk about that with you.
Yeah, sure, Tony. I have no problem, by the way, if this article turned out to be part of the funding source for that project of ours, but that's okay. We can talk about that later. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zambon. Okay, Tony, thank you for the presentation. I'm trying to get some clarity here. So the project name is Town Reservoir Sediment Removal. And at this point, you anticipate that the only sediment that's going to be removed is the sandbar. Is that correct?
That's what I'm hoping, yes.
And that would be a relatively low cost item, I would assume, correct?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
Whenever you go to dredge, there's a huge number of considerations that you have to do.
Okay. So, well, do you have a sense of what the cost would be then?
No, I can't give you that because.
But you know it's not a low cost.
Oh, we know it's not low. After having been through Rosemary Lake, I can tell you it's not low.
Okay. So is it going to be multiple millions of dollars?
No.
Right.
No, if we were to dredge the entire reservoir,
but
it would cost about $2.2 million at the most.
But that's not what you anticipate doing.
No,
okay. So if you're going to dredge if you're just dredging the sandbar, if you're just removing the sandbar,
yeah,
what would that cost be?
I don't know the full extent of the size of the sandbar. I can't give you that number. I just don't know. Hello?
Okay, so you can't give us an estimate either?
No, not at this point. After the design work is done, I'll be able to do that.
And then the design, when you said it's a much larger area than the reservoir, how large is the area that you're going to be examining? Where does it go? Where does it go geographically?
Okay, so if you think of the reservoir as being at the very bottom, it goes like by Broadmeadow Road, you know, next to the railroad tracks. It goes, you know, up Broadmeadow, and then it starts going up, you know, where, you know, Dawson Drive goes up, and
So you're, at that point, you're up to like halfway up Bird's Hill.
more than halfway, but yes. Yeah, it's a good portion of Bird's Hill.
Bird's Hill down through the golf course.
Bird's Hill, yeah, it kind of goes across the top of Bird's Hill, past Hillcrest, past Bird's Hill Road. And
do you have any documents where you actually are saying this is the area that we're potentially going to be looking at?
I guess the best way to answer that would be yes, because we have already divided the town into 16 sub-watershed areas. That already exists.
So is this going to be, is this part of an identified numbered watershed area?
I would say areas,
Okay.
because there's a huge chunk of this watershed which comes from the where the bend in Great Plain Avenue is, what used to be called Bond's Corner, near Mount Vernon and Beaufort Avenue. There is a huge culvert that goes under Great Plain Avenue at that point that picks up water, you know, from that direction, brings it through the culvert, and that culvert eventually discharges into a brook, which goes at the end of Ivy Road, and then continues its way down to the low spot at Harris Avenue. If you think about it, from Great Plain Avenue, you go down Harris, and then you come back up again when you go towards Wilshire.
Yes.
There's a culvert at the low spot right there, which feeds into the golf course property. That is a good chunk. Also, the watershed is quite large.
All right, is that all of that going to be examined and as part of this money that you're requesting? Is that part of the project? You're going to be looking at that entire area to look at what the inputs are into the reservoir?
Yes, we would be looking at that entire area, and we would be proposing stormwater structures that you know, provide at least the minimum amount of removal to improve the water quality. For example, well, do you want an example?
Sure, sure.
For example, the new modifications that the EPA put out on their NIPDES regulations now require that Needham remove 55% of all of contributing phosphorus. It used to be 45%. They changed it to 55%. I think Needham will be okay in this regard over the span of time. However, that doesn't mean that we have to treat, you know, every gallon of water. It means that we have to treat 55% of it.
what I'm trying to do is identify what it is that this money is actually going to be used for. So we're going to be examining these areas that, you know, we're up to Harrison, we're up to Great Plain, we're wrapping around Birds Hill, and we're looking at the culverts and the storm drainage system, et cetera. And we're looking at basically inputs that eventually find their way to the town reservoir.
Yep.
Is that what we're doing? Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have, when we did Rosemary Pond, did we use any CPC money for the inputs into the Rosemary Pond?
No, we had already taken care of it.
So the answer is no. So then what we did do was we used CPC money to actually clean the pond.
That's correct. To design it and to clean it.
But this money is going to be very different than that, right? This money is going to be, it sounds like, almost entirely used away from the reservoir, right?
I would say it's a good statement to say that more of it would be used to study the uphill areas,
right,
than to design the sediment removal.
Right. So it's really addressing up gradient and input into the reservoir.
I would agree with that.
Okay. All right. So I guess I appreciate your presentation. I guess I'm trying to square the presentation with the application, if you will, because the application says town reservoir sediment removal. But I think we're really doing something else.
We're doing both. We're doing both. When the project was initially conceived, you know, we thought that, you know, we were going to have to dredge the reservoir, dredge the whole thing. And I can tell you, after having completed the Rosemary Lake dredging project, if there is any way that we can avoid doing that to the reservoir, then we should be pursuing that. There's no guarantee.
I understand that, but you need to address the inputs. You addressed the inputs for the Rosemary Lake as well. And yes, you should avoid dredging by addressing inputs. That goes without saying. The question is whether or not we should be using CPC money to address the inputs, because that's really what this request is, it seems to me. I mean, that's the way it looks to me. But I guess I have some additional questions, which is under your capital funding request, under future projects, it also lists Walker Pond, Farley Pond, Forbes Pond, Sabrina Lake, Wildwood Pond, and Sportsman Pond. So are we to anticipate that coming down the road? There are going to be CPC requests for grant money to address whatever those projects are.
It is possible. The Walker Pond one, I will be, I believe it's February 3rd on your agenda.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Sure. Walker Pond's already on. Walker Pond's on deck. But then we've got these others: Farley Pond, Forbes, Sabrina, Wildwood, Sportsman.
Yes. I mean, they all have to be looked at, but everything is very dynamic right now with regards to the other ponds. Some I think are more likely than others to be addressed. I'll give you an example. The Farley Pond one, at one point, we actually had taken some testing of the pond. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in the wintertime, years past, the pond would freeze over and it could be used as for ice skating. And it didn't freeze. It didn't freeze over. It unfortunately was, and in this case, I can use the word contaminated with coliform bacteria. We addressed most of that problem when we eliminated the sewage pumping station, the in-ground sewage pumping station at the end of Richardson Drive. That was a source. It was a very old metal station. It had rotted away and the sewage was soaking into the ground. So when we eliminated that, we eliminated the source of the contamination, and the bacteria levels in Farley Pond dropped. So,
funding for that project, was that done by CPC?
No.
Right.
No, it was a sewage pumping station project.
Right. Okay. All right. I don't have any other questions. Laura Dorfman. Thank you, John.
Just a thought, and I'm relatively new, but is it possible that people looking at this might try to compare this to the Rosemary Lake project? And if so, should we really understand the differences or the similarities between them or not? I'm just thinking.
Well, I think actually that's probably a question for the committee to address and not the presenter. But that's a real live issue. That is, yeah. So, okay, Joe Barnes.
Yeah, quick question, Mr. Chair. I'm questioning where you were going with your final question to Tony. Is it fair to say that the further you get away from the reservoir and start to get to Great Plain Ave, Tudor Road, Hillcrest, you're now talking more about a public works project rather than a CPC project with the reservoir? I mean, it sounds as though there are a lot of contributing factors to the condition of the reservoir, and once you get beyond that reservoir, it's similar to the McLeod Field with the pipe. What do we do? How far does CPC go to solve the problem?
So I think, again, that's a question for the committee, but that I hope it was plain for the committee to see where I was going. We're going, but yeah, I mean, it's a concern that I have. And Rosemary Lake I was around for that. And I remember being that all the inputs were none of the inputs were paid for by CPC, but we paid for the dredging. And, it's probably, I'm not going to fault the applicant, for making the application, because, the words themselves on the statute, are subject to some interpretation. And arguably, even if you were cleaning up catch basins on the top of Bird's Hill, if they eventually found their way down into the reservoir, I suppose you can argue that it has to do with the preservation of open space or the rehabilitation and restoration of land for recreational use, I suppose. But I guess my point is that, at some point we have to make that decision. Okay, Mr. Alpert. And, I don't want to keep Tony on the hook too.
Right.
So I don't think these are questions for him. And I don't think we need to keep him here. And I do.
But Mr. Chairman, if I may, we have to remember.
Unless we have any additional questions for him.
No, I just want to comment on what we're talking about here, which is that we have to focus in and remember that what we're talking about here is an application for design funds. This is not an application for the funding of the project. We do get into the question of the Siegenthaler objection, but it's what I'm hearing from Tony is that we're spending the money now to look into what needs to be done to clean up Alden Brook, which is a, waterway. If it turns out that what we're doing is fixing up things at the top of Bird's Hill, then maybe that's not CPC funded, but we're not at that stage yet. We're just going for design funds to find out what the problem.
Well,
what
why
the
are we
reasons
gonna,
are.
why are we gonna spend design funds money on something that's not CPC, that can't be funded by the CPC?
That's the Siegenthaler argument.
Exactly.
That we don't know whether it's CPC, whether it's a CPC project or partly a CPC project and partly not until we do the design work. So it's a chicken and egg question. But clearly, if I may, clearly the sandbar needs to be removed. And that is a CPC matter. And so we're doing the design to find out what needs to be done to clean out the reservoir, which will include dredging the sandbar at the very least.
All right, Paul, is this your project? I'm sorry.
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. So, but the design funds, the number in comparison, I guess we'll stay on topic if that's okay with the committee. The number for the consulting, when you compare it, Laura did her research. When you compare the design funds money, compare that to Rosemary, it is an eye-popping 2.5 times the amount. It's clear that we're not designing removing a sandbar. We're doing a lot more than that. It's clear, right? It's, and I think, again, I don't want to, I'm not trying to impugn anyone, but I think the application itself, it doesn't even, the words in the page don't even fit with what we were hearing. Sediment removal. I mean, I don't know. It concerns me. That's all. But it's also this lesson, by the way, for all of us on this committee, to the fact that we should be doing to make sure that we do our due diligence questions when we get these applications in the front end, because we wouldn't have had this evening. We could have sussed all of this out well in advance. So I'm as much to blame as everybody else. But anyway, all right. Rick.
I have to find my unmute button, Mr. Chairman. I just not wanting to pile on to this thought process because it really doesn't impact Tony, with the exception of the fact that what I don't want to see is the CPA money being used to clean up every pond and brook in the town of Needham. If that be the case, given what's involved in doing that and cleaning up and going from, in improving all of I don't think that was originally what we were intending to spend the money on. And we start with one project and then we roll to the next one and the next one. And I can see over the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to wind up with a series of projects that all involve improving water quality, either in a pond or a stream and a river. And this is all going to come back so that basically we're using CPA money to clean up the town's water sources. And I'm not sure that, number one, that's an intent. Number two, I'm not sure it's a good use of CPA funds, giving everything else we have on the books. And I think that's a discussion for another night. But the point being is that I think it's a discussion worth having.
Okay, I agree with you, and that's kind of where I was going, and we'll have Karis. Karis, can you?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to sort of weigh in is I think the justification of using CPC funds for the Rosemary in particular had a lot to do with the recreational utilization of that space and the fact that it was used for fishing and boating and some other items. And I think when we talk about the reservoir, we have a similar location with a similar function, in that it's not just a water body that has this sediment issue, but it's also a water body that people recreate at. It has 2 dedicated constructed fishing piers. So I think it's a little bit different than potentially some of the other projects that we have listed out that may need sediment removal or may need some sort of mitigation process, but aren't necessarily directly tied into recreation.
Except that the big exception is all inputs were not, none of the inputs were funded by CPC funds. And in fact, I almost, because I was pretty new in the committee, and I don't really know these environmental issues the way Paul does or the way Tony does. But I in my head, I got this idea that anything that's covered, anything that's underground and that's covered, we're not covering. Anything that's above the ground and it's open space and we're recreating on top on, we'll cover it. But if it's going through the pipes and this and that, and that's kind of what either someone represented to me or the sense that I got when we were dealing with Rosemary Pond. So, but this is actually all this real, let's be realistic. This is all the stuff that's covered that eventually finds its way, except for a sandbar, that eventually finds its way into the reservoir. You know, that's what it looks like to me. So, Laura.
So a couple things, and if it's for another time, let me know. But the Rosemary Lake requests, as this one, were only for open space, not recreation. That's the way they were categorized. I don't know what they were finally submitted as. And the other thing is, my question is, if there are 33% of the cities and towns in the state don't have CPA funds, so what would a community do in this situation if they didn't have access to these funds and they had to mitigate a level 5 water body? I mean, what
So
would they do?
That actually goes to another point, a discussion point that we've had as a committee and that we've had as a town, which is CPC is kind of like for the extras, the things that we otherwise would not be able to afford. Well, this is a mandate. We have to do it. And so other cities and towns, they'd find a way because they would have to do it.
Right. Okay.
So.
And one more thing, and I'm sorry, when you talk about inputs and should we be responsible, should we look at Walker Pond in the same way? I mean, I know it's private residences that are possibly causing these inputs, but it's a similar kind of thing to me, that if the source of the issue is not the body of water, but some other thing maybe outside our purview. I mean, how do you handle that and make it fair?
Yep, it's all for us to discuss, and we need to discuss it as we go forward. I don't know that we have other matters too. I think we kind of have the issues on the table. And if anyone else has, kind of to close out the discussion for tonight, and I think we need to kind of think about this a little bit more. Paul, I'm going to give you the last word because I feel like it's your project and you were making the distinctions that you were distinguishing some of the things that I was saying. So I want to give you the last word.
Well, yeah, and the last word that I'm going to give is maybe I came on too strong as being an advocate for going forward with the project and going forward with the funding for the design funds. I'm really not there. I'm listening to what you're saying, to what the arguments are here, and I may very well agree that perhaps we shouldn't be funding the design funds, or perhaps we should be funding only a percentage of it based on what percentage of it may wind up being for the dredging of Rosemary, as opposed to the funding of something that is not a CPC fundable remedy. So I agree that this is something that we all have to consider and possibly get better information from Tony as to where he thinks we will wind up going with the actual mitigation. project. And so, yeah, that's something that, and this is not totally my project. Penny is supposed to be working on this with me, but she's not here tonight. But I think that this will necessitate another meeting among myself and Penny and Tony and Karis.
Okay, so then let's put it in a point. Let's tee it up so that you as the, the liaisons have a path forward. So, you could see that what the concerns that I've expressed, and it is just kind of contrary to what we've done in the past. That's all I can say. And so there must be some document out there that gave them the idea of how much this consulting fee, what the project would entail, the geographic scope of it. Because this is a pretty bare bones application. And that, I actually don't, to be honest, I don't know how this actually could go on the Warren article. It's not really what the project is. So, I have like fundamental questions about it.
What's the number there, Peter?
What's that?
What's the number that Tony's asking for?
$262,000.
And how much was the design phase at Rosemary?
Laura?
We have.
Laura, do you know the design phase at Rosemary?
Sorry, yes, 118,000.
Okay, so this is almost 2.5 times that.
Okay.
So they're coming up with a number somehow. There has to be more information out there. And but it doesn't, in my mind, there are some impediments here for them to get funding from CPC.
So Tony's still here. Tony, I think we need an answer to the question of why is the design request here 2.5 times the design request for Rosemary? And I'm not asking you to answer that question now. I don't think we want you to because it's getting late, but it's something that we will discuss, outside of this meeting.
All right, why don't you take that offline with Tony?
Yes.
All right, good. Okay, all right, Bob.
Very quickly, Mr. Chair, semantics, this seems more like not a request for design, but a request for investigation and feasibility, because if we don't know which process we're going to use, how can we design it? That's all.
Yeah, that kind of goes to the question of the request itself and the language and the words on the page of the request itself. This stuff ends up printed on a warrant, so that's problematic in my mind from the get-go. But you can kind of work that out with Tony, and his department is going to have to make some decisions about what they want to do, whether amend it, withdraw it, change it, clarify it, whatever. I don't want my opinion to be the one that I want to make sure we have a sense of the committee that these are some. I have these concerns. I assume some other people have shared these concerns. Am I right? I'm looking around at the committee. Do we have? Okay. All right. So this is a sense of the committee. Okay. All right. And Rick, did you have a comment?
Nope.
No. Okay.
Nope,
all right. So let's move on to our next topic, if that's okay. And I'm sorry we belabored that one.
Thank you, Tony.
All right. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay.
Thanks, Tony.
Sorry, but I've lost my agenda. Just give me a second.
Town hall clock.
Okay, town hall clock. All right.
Yay.
And that's Chris.
Yes, it is.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. And Karis, thank you very much for sending out the email that was forwarded this morning, or excuse me, by Barry Dulong, who is the proponent submitting the article. It has a cost breakdown and a little bit more meat to the bone, if I can put it that way, of what exactly the work is. I know that as a CPC committee, we have looked at this and we're kind of hesitant on deeming if this is eligible. I think what's a good amount of the information that has come back, I think, in my opinion, this deems to have discussion if it is is deemable for CPC funding. Now, I know that one of the things we have talked about also is maybe not the full amount, maybe there's a certain percentage. In the email that was forwarded, there is a breakdown of percentages of what could be restoration and what could be maintenance. So I'm not saying the full amount has to be done, but we could have that conversation of maybe part of it could be funded because it is restoration and not maintenance. But I'm open to have discussion about that with the email that was sent.
Okay, Chris, thanks. And thanks for the additional information. So let's go around the horn, if you will, comments and questions. So now this is really a question of, we're back to determination of eligibility, town hall clock repairs. There was an email and attachments that were provided to us addressing the questions that we had raised. So Paul, Albert, questions?
Well, I have to admit, I did not study that email carefully. I didn't have time to today. But in my glancing at it, it sounded to me like we're really talking about repairs and not renovation. And, if somebody wants to point out to me where it's more where a portion of it is renovation and not repair, I'd be willing to listen to funding a portion of it, but it really sounds like repair to me, repair and maintenance.
Okay, so all right, I think that's not the right. Aren't the questions that we have are preservation and but restoration is not defined. Is that what it is? I'm looking at the statute. Do I have that right? We've never
Yeah, I think you're correct, Mr. Chair, that the statute talks about restoration but doesn't define it. But what it does say clearly is we're not to fund repair and maintenance. Ordinary repair and maintenance is not to be.
That's true. Okay, so you're saying it still falls under that. Okay. All right, that's your comment. All right, let's go around the horn. Joe Barnes.
Chris, refresh my memory. This was not part of the town hall renovation because of funding? Is that?
No, actually, with having a conversation with Barry Dulong, this was part of the original restoration that was done with the town hall, let's say 10 years ago. For speaking with Barry and the architect that was examined the clock tower, that it wasn't done right the first time. That if you look at the two, because there are 4 clock facings, one, north, south, east, and west.
Yep.
The ones that get the direct sunlight, so the ones looking right on Great Plain Ave, and the side that's on the Walgreens sees the most sunlight, that the work that was originally done wasn't done correctly. That's why you're seeing the chipping, and you can't even read the clock time because of how bad it is defaced. That it wasn't done right the first time. So that's why they're asking to be redone the right time, the right way this time.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. And Artie Crocker.
Yeah, I'm not sure if by default those comments about what happened after the first time makes it ineligible or not, as far as it's more maintenance. So, I honestly don't know, but I mean, it sounds like, we had these questions at the beginning. What was done when the town hall was renovated? Clearly this clock was, let's say, done then. The fact that it wasn't done right, or it needs repair or maintenance now, does seem like it simply falls under maintenance. That's my initial take.
Okay, Bob Dermody. Oh, Artie, no other comments?
No, I can't think of anything else, Peter.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bob Dermody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe this is not eligible.
Okay. Wow. Okay, that falls under comment, and that's great.
I
Okay.
should preface, that was not a question, it was a statement.
The state,
Why don't we just make a motion? Skip all of this stuff.
wait, let's get everyone's input. Laura Dorfman.
I can elaborate if you'd like, but I'll
Oh,
just.
yeah, sure. Wait a minute. Yes, I'd love to hear you. Yes.
All right. Just the way it's written, it's a tortured semantic exercise of scrape and paint. It's maintenance, it's repair, it's not restoration. If we don't do this, the clock's not going to fall down. The town hall's not going to fall down. It's not our fault that it wasn't done properly in the first place. I think that's not a good precedent to set for CPC funds to be used to fix things like that. It's just, and I'm trying to dig it out right now. I did have a chance to skim this earlier, but I think Chris, you'd said there's like an 80-20 breakdown or a 60-40 breakdown.
It is a 60-40 breakdown.
And what was the 60 and what was the 40?
Let's see. So of the 102 500,000 project costs, 60% of it is related to restoration of the clock facing, with about 40% of it is related to repainting of the balance of the cupola.
Okay, so thank you. So if you then go and read what the clock face and the cupola is, they use the same words to describe it: scrape and paint in both of them. So
okay,
those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dermody. Ms. Dorfman.
Thank you. I'm just reading the little handbook I got when I joined, and it does seem to me that this is repair work.
Meaning repair or maintenance?
Yes, both.
Maintenance, incidental repair.
Correct.
Okay. All right. All right. Chris, we've already heard from you, but you want to speak?
The only, and I know Kristen was part of the conversation that I had with Barry, that if I could kind of tag her in to kind of give her input, I could do that now and yield my time. Or if you want to push her towards the end to have the commission talk, I'm good either way. But I mean, I would really like to have Kristen kind of weigh in also, because she was part of the conversation that we had with Barry.
All right, we're gonna have Kristen speak after we finish with the committee.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, Rick Zimbo.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I remember reading through this document earlier, and I seem to also remember sections in the document where it talked about needing to do this again in 2031, 2041, 2051, basically every 10 years. And that, to me, is the perfect definition of maintenance and not restoration. So based on that, I think I'm going to concur with Mr. Dermody.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and now, Kristen, do you mind if we call on you?
No,
I guess maybe I'm supposed to speak, I guess. I was a little bit on the fence, but now there's some additional information that you guys have, Rick, you sussed out the fact that it's going to basically be done every 10 years, which is about how often you're supposed to paint a house in New England. So it's a painting exercise. It's an elaborate one, that's for sure, because it is a historic artifact. So I like a lot of things that applications that come before us, depending on how you interpret the words on the page, you know, you could fit it under there. But I think that if we looked at the spirit of the statute, we would probably look at this as a maintenance project, given that we do it, you're supposed to do it every 10 years and it's scrape and paint. But obviously, you know, you could make an argument that it is something more than maintenance. But let's hear Kristen. Kristen, can you?
So just from a factual standpoint, the things that Barry was mentioning in the conversation was more based on the fact that because the primer failed, this is still a preservation of the historical building, and without doing it, you may cause more damage to the underneath part of the clock as well. There's certain specific paint that is required to continue to preserve that part of the clock. I believe the documentation that was sent this afternoon or this morning was more about the painting and gold leafing. It did say that the gold leafing wasn't necessary for 30 years, not necessarily the first 2 times that it has to be done. So that could be a consideration. But I think the biggest thing that Barry was stressing was that it's preservation of that part of the building. I mean, I don't think anyone can tell what will happen if it's done differently or done with straight maintenance or not done to historical relevance. But it is preservation of that part to secure and keep the building, the original building, safe and preserved in historic nature.
Okay. Okay, so we have heard we've gotten some additional information. I guess we have to have a motion on the question of eligibility. Is that what we do? Do we vote it up or down? Right, okay. So would someone like to make the motion? Oh, well, I guess, so we have to, do we make the motion, Kristen, in the affirmative? Move to, or, yeah, I think that's what we have to do. So we have to make a motion. Go ahead, Chris.
I'd like to make, oops, sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
Either way, you can do it.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we deem the clock tower or clock proposal eligible for CPC funding.
Okay, and so that motion is done by Chris Gerstle, and I will second the motion, Chair Pingator. Now we'll take a roll call vote. Oh, first of all, further discussion.
Mr. Chair?
All right, we got Albert's hand is up first. Let's go with Paul Albert.
Mr. Chairman, if you've got the statute in front of you, could you please reread the definition of preservation? If my recollection is that preservation talks about preventing injury.
So all right, let's read the section for maintenance and then read the section for preservation. And then I'm going to read, if you will, there's another sentence that I want to read under section B2 of section 5. Yes.
I'd like to follow along at home. If you could announce the page number, please.
Yes. Okay, so this is under the Community Preservation Act. This is section 1, and I have it as page 12 of my materials that Kristen gave me when I joined the committee.
Okay, I'll go grab mine. Go right ahead.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just while he's gone, could you just have the motion read back? I'm having a problem hearing, and I wasn't sure if I heard the motion correctly.
So the motion was done in the affirmative to that the project is eligible under the CPA.
Okay.
Is that okay? And I
just couldn't hear, so I was just wondering what it was.
All right, did I represent that correctly, you think?
You
Kristen?
did.
Okay, good. Okay. All right, Bob, are you back at your station? Okay, so first, and I don't want to dictate exactly what we read, but these are the 3 sections that I would look at. Maintenance, definition of maintenance. Incidental repairs, which neither materially add to the value of the property, nor appreciably prolong the property's life, but keep the property in a condition of fitness, efficiency, or readiness. And then the next definition would be preservation, protection of personal or real property from injury, harm, or destruction. And then I think that you probably should also look at the definition of rehabilitation, and then I'm going to read you one last section. Rehabilitation is capital improvements, the making of extraordinary repairs. This is truncated. Extraordinary repairs to historic resources, okay, ellipse, for the purpose of making such historic resources functional for their intended uses, including but not limited to improvements to comply with the ADA and other state and federal codes. And then with respect to historic resources, rehabilitation shall comply with the standards for rehabilitation stated in the United States Secretary of the Interior Standards for Treatment of Historic Properties codified at 36 CFR Part 68. And that is the only application with respect to those are the 2 provisions concerning historic resources. And then if you go to your section 5A, and this is beginning on page 15 and going on to page 16 of the materials, and this is subparagraph 2, the Community Preservation Committee shall make recommendations to the legislative body for preservation, rehabilitation, restoration of historic resources. So those are your three functions with historic resources: preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration. And we've pointed out that restoration is not defined. I think, but we do have a definition for preservation and rehabilitation. So those are the three sections that I would look at of the statute. Laura. Laura.
Sorry, I think I have a different book because my pages are different, but the page I was looking at was the one that says Community Preservation Act funds may not be spent for the following purposes.
Okay, good. Where is that section?
I have it on page 9, but I don't know if
That's
mine
probably not
pages.
this, that may not be the statute, but that's okay. That's a secondary source.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. Read that to us.
Okay, it says, well, do you want me to read the pertinent one or all of them?
Pertinent.
Pay for routine maintenance defined as the upkeep of any real or personal property.
So what they're doing there is interpreting for us the statutory.
It's confusing, I think, because rehabilitation and maintenance are routine maintenance to me are two kind of conflicting things.
Yes, I agree.
Two different things.
I agree with you. I agree. It's a little bit confusing, and that's why. So that's why we're having a debate, and that's why we're having a vote, and that's why yes, Artie.
I mean, would we ever look at any projects and say every 10 years we have to vote CPC money for the preservation of this building, of a building, for example? We want to preserve the building, so for every 10 years we're going to pay for the painting of that building.
Okay, so yeah. I mean, I characterize that as quote crazy when I first like that. I don't know that that's really what we should be doing. We've already done a restoration of the entire building to the tune of $15 million contributed by the CPC, and so this sounds like periodic maintenance. Sure, it needs to be maintained in a particular way, otherwise historically it will be degraded. But it seems like for me, my personal view on that, it seems like that would be a push for me to basically become a maintenance funding source for artifacts that we've preserved and restored. But right, I think you could fit it in. The language of the statute is pretty broad and pretty flexible, and it's intended to be that way. Okay, I think. Paul.
Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that any maintenance that you do, if you don't do it somewhere down the road, you're going to have to spend the money to do preservation.
Correct.
So, yeah. So we're at the level of maintenance right now. It's scraping and painting.
When it falls down, come see us.
Okay. All right. So further discussion. Okay. All right. Hearing none, let's have our roll. We're going to have a roll call vote. Mr. Albert.
No.
Mr. Barnes.
I should have spoken up earlier. If I could just make a comment here. The job initially, it sounds as though it was not done properly. And I'm wondering if we should be putting the screws to the town, or putting the screws to the town hall because of a job that was poorly done. I would consider having this done this time with the caveat that it be done with all full knowledge, what you've learned from the previous time, that's not going to have it happen again, because this is a one-shot deal by the CPC. So I'd want to consider that. So I would vote to support that.
All right. So you are a yay. Okay.
I'm a yay.
Yeah, Crocker. Mr. Crocker.
I vote no, and since we're having, I vote no because they're already stating at some point in the language that every 10 years it's going to be done. Well, it's at the 10-year mark, so I don't see how anything's changed. So I vote no.
Okay, Mr. Dermody.
Since this is the vote and comment section, I will vote no. And my comment is that I think we should go back to the town and request money back from the 15 million.
Okay,
God, it's getting late.
all right, fine. Ms. Dorfman.
I feel terrible, but I have to say no to this one, even though I want it to be done. I'm looking at the Register of Historic Properties. I don't see the town hall listed. I don't know if it matters.
It's on the town's historic property register. It's not on the
Okay.
national or the state, it's on the town's.
It is on the towns? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I can't see a way. I don't understand. I don't see it the way that others do it. I don't see it as a preservation
Okay,
project.
all right, Mr. Gersten.
I vote yay because in my definition, I think this falls under rehabilitation.
Thank you. And Mr. Zimbo.
I'm a no.
And Mr. Pingator votes no, without comment.
Duly noted.
Okay. Okay, guys and gals, folks, that's what we say, I guess. All right, let's go with liaison updates. We're going to do a lightning round.
Can you please
Okay.
report the results of the aforementioned vote, Mr. Chair?
Oh, we have yeah, Kristen.
The motion fails 2-6.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like, Chris, I think the vote was stolen from us. I've heard that before recently.
I think we're strong-armed.
I think you two actually, you guys fit into the demographics of insurgents. So go get them.
Peter,
All right.
Peter, could I ask you to go find 3 or 4 more votes?
All right, let's stop.
Don't ever lump us in with that group.
Stop. This is being recorded. And I started it, I'm sorry. Actually, no, you guys started.
You did.
All right, let's do our liaison updates, lightning round, okay? Emery Grover renovations.
Neither Bob nor I have spoken to any of the proponents since the last time. I don't think we plan on talking to them before the presentation, do we, Bob?
Not that we have scheduled, but we would not be opposed to it.
Yeah, if I think if the committee wants additional information, we can certainly get that, but it seems to us as though it's all about funding and not about the actual, nuts and bolts of the project.
Okay. Okay, town common historic redesign and beautification updates.
No updates at this time unless Captain Negative has anything to say.
I would remind Mr. Gerstle that this is a public hearing and to refrain from addressing other members as thus. Thank you.
I apologize.
Accept.
Ad hominem attacks are prohibited. Okay. Resurface synthetic track at DeFazio. Any updates?
No,
Okay.
there's no reason to change.
McLeod, right?
No.
McLeod Field
No,
renovation.
it is as it is. Nothing to change. Nothing's changed.
Okay, and trail identification, nothing from me. Walker Pond improvements. Any further comments, Laura and Rick?
Yes.
Rick, do you want to?
Yeah, we've had some discussions back and forth with Tony. He, in anticipation of a meeting, we've now scheduled for all of the interested parties, I guess will be the way I describe them. Tony taking the lead on the presentation. So we've now got a meeting scheduled for, Laura, correct me, it's been so many, is it Monday or Tuesday? Laura, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I have some background noise here that I can't.
Is it Monday or Tuesday? That's all. I think
Hold on,
it's
I'm
Tuesday.
you in 1 second.
Is it Tuesday the 26th? Yeah, I know it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday, the 26th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things we've been back and forth with Tony on is to trying to get a little bit better of an understanding as to what the physical features are of the manhole that they're putting in, of the design for the tree bed that they're proposing. This all gets back to the whole discussion about pre-treatment versus actual treatment and or actual mitigation of the pond. So I've asked him, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it next Tuesday, but I've asked him to incorporate that as part of his discussion when he makes a presentation to the group. And we'll go through it a little bit more in detail when we talk to the group on Tuesday. That's all.
Okay. I have a question, which is we were provided with a lot of materials last year before it was withdrawn. And well, you know what? I'll go back online. I just want to make sure I have everything because I want to read everything before our next meeting. But we had a lot of materials last year, and I assume that we have them on the website. Is that right, Karis?
The proposals are on the website, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And all right, fine. I just want to make sure.
For last year, I didn't see them for last year. I have them emailed to me, but I didn't see last year's on the website.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure that the committee has all of the stuff that you guys have.
I will send, Tony sent me a bunch of information that the committee may or may not have. Sent it to Laura and I. I'll forward it to Karis as the vehicle to getting it out to the rest of the committee because it does talk about 3 phases of the project. There's some emails that people were involved in that we weren't involved with. And it helps to try and set the background of the project and what's been talked about, what's been done. And none of us were really aware of that. And so Tony was kind enough to forward that along because there's been a lot of discussions leading up to their application that would be applicable for what we're addressing and discussing here.
Great.
And Karis did provide us with the request from last year and all of that other background stuff from the proponents who at the time were the residents, remember?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, and our next meeting, Karis, we're going to have Emery Grover and Walker Pond. And that's it, right? For presenters. Is that right?
We've already.
Yes, yeah, because we didn't.
Okay, so those are two. Just want to make sure we all have the materials so we can.
No, and I apologize, Peter. The school committee will not be able to meet with us until the 17th
Okay.
of February, so we'll just have one next time.
Okay, great. All right, so let's just make sure we all have those materials. That's all in advance. Okay. Okay. Now this is Rick's been. This is Rick's special project. He's a subcommittee of 1, and this is a report on increasing bucket amounts. And this is kind of add to some further discussion and that we had in our prior meeting, and Rick's got some information to update us on.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, in an effort to keep it brief, since the school committee's been pushed off another 2 weeks, may I suggest, I'll just give a real quick update, and then we put an agenda item next week to talk about this in more depth.
I think that's a great idea. If you want to just table, yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I got not even a 2-minute update.
Okay.
I had conversations with Stuart.
Sanger.
What's his name?
Sanger, isn't it?
Sanganar, I think.
Sanganar, sorry.
Sanganar, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyways, we had a discussion about the concept and what we were thinking about and discussing and the whole bit. He really thinks what we're doing is I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but it was almost like he was saying it's what the intent of the act really was. And he gives us a lot of kudos for doing this, and he's really interested in what our discussion is. But basically what he said is most towns just do the 10% minimum allocations, and they then take projects on a first come, first served basis. He said to try and look ahead and plan and forecast is really what a lot of towns he thinks should be doing. And he thought he was commending us for our efforts to just take a look at it. But he did say in the conversation that there are a number of towns that do not dedicate the minimum 10% to each bucket. like we do and like majority of the towns do. There are other towns out there, such as Cambridge, Somerville, who allocate as much as 80%, 70 to 80% into the affordable housing bucket, because under their program, they believe that it's in their best interest to do so. It's one of the major concerns that they have as a town or as a city with respect to utilizing the CPA money. And that's what they've made the decision to do. And they appropriate it that way every year, and they may fluctuate the amount, but in essence, that's it. The town of Bourne allocates most of their money to open space. And they do that because they're concerned about maintaining the open space in the town, some of the natural resources they have down there. So they do that. He said there are a number of other towns that will allocate money in a particular bucket for future use. He commented Duxbury, for one, just authorized the holding for future use in the housing, affordable housing budget, an additional X dollars over and above the typical 10%. And that's to be used to fund specific affordable housing projects that may not be identified, but will be coming up in future years. There's another town that actually allocates money directly to the town's housing authority. And they have an agreement and understanding that the housing authority will screen projects that would ordinarily come through for CPA funding.
You mean the housing trust, not the housing authority?
Sorry, not the housing authority. Thank you. The housing trust. I contacted the woman, Karen Sonnenberg, who's in the housing trust. Also talked to Sandy Sincata, got the minutes from the board meeting where the housing trust was established a few years ago. And so I'm not sure we want to do that. That's a discussion for the next time, but it's something we can consider. Other towns are doing it. My own personal opinion is I prefer to keep any money that we pledge for future use. We keep that under our control and not turn it over to someone else, make them come back to us each year knowing that they have that money available. But he said it's a way to help prioritize your expenditures going forward so that you're not all, for example, you're not throwing all the money into just recreation, that you're using it and you're earmarking it for some other purpose. So that's kind of the update. We can get into it in more detail 2 weeks from now.
Okay, let's do it. Yeah, that's good.
Where we are.
All right, that's a good update. Let's put it on the agenda for 2 weeks from now. And I can talk to you offline about some maybe additional information you might want to think about and put together. And I think that's okay. And then we'll go from there. Is that all right?
Sounds good.
That's great. By the way, thank you, Rick. Okay, we have 2 minutes to approve. 1 minutes for the December 23rd, 2021 meeting, and minutes for the January 6th, 2021 meeting. So let's start with our December 23rd, 2021 minutes. I'll make a motion to approve. May I hear a second?
Second.
The December 23rd of 2020?
Yes, I was going to make that correction. Thank you, Mr. Dermody.
I'm just trying to be positive.
Thank you. I was just reading the script. It's December 23rd, 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have the minutes in front of me. I did read them both. One set of minutes has a paragraph repeated twice.
Yeah.
So I would say subject to technical corrections.
Okay, so first of all, I made the motion. Chris had the second. Is that right? So let's just get the record right. Chris Gerstle second.
No, I was making the correction. I was backing up Bob, but I will take the second if that's what it takes to get this going.
Okay.
I second it, yeah.
Okay. And Kristen, I have a question for Kristen. I don't know if that was a mistake or did we actually close the meeting and then reopen it again to have a discussion about the buckets.
You're talking about the January 6th, and actually I noticed that tonight when I was looking through something else. That I don't know how it happened, but that was a mistake. And I've already removed it from.
That's not a problem. Fine. Okay, so all right. So that's
No,
December.
totally.
Okay, so let's have a roll call vote. This is on December 23rd, 2020 minutes. Mr. Barnes.
Aye.
Mr. Grauper.
Aye.
Mr. Crocker.
Aye.
Ms. Dorfman.
Aye.
Dermody.
Aye.
Gerstle.
Aye.
As a bone.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay, next is our January 6th, 2021 minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
would Mr. Rocker like to abstain since he was not present at the meeting?
Who abstains?
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Parker.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
all right.
That sounds good to me. Thanks, Kristen.
Another example of voter fraud.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to accept the meeting minutes subject to technical changes.
I will second that.
Okay, and we will have, okay, so you have to announce your name. Mr. Zambone makes the motion. Mr. Gerstle.
Mr.
seconds.
Chris Gerstle seconds that motion.
Okay, good. All right, well, discussion. Hearing none, let's have a vote. Mr. Alpert.
Aye.
Mr. Barnes.
Aye.
Mr. Crocker.
Isn't this the one I'm staying from?
Abstain.
Was it
No, this is
earlier?
January. No, you're okay.
Aye.
Dermody.
Aye.
Dorfman.
Aye.
Zambone.
You get Gershel?
Gerstle is an aye also.
I thought, all right, Chris.
Zimbone's an aye.
And the chair votes aye. Sorry, Chris.
He's
Okay.
easy to forget.
All right, with that, we have concluded our agenda and
Mr. Chair,
yes,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I just would throw this out for discussion at another time if possible. I'm wondering if when applicants apply, does it make sense for them to also include in the application what other possible funding sources there would be for what they're asking for and the outcome of them requesting those funding sources so that we know going in all the time, we are their last resort. I'm not sure if that's too much to ask, but I just wonder.
Karis.
Just, I think two things on that. So the first I would say is we had a conversation about this summer revitalizing our own community preservation plan. And I believe it would be perfectly appropriate to talk about updating the application then. I know I've talked with the town manager and I think the application is as old as the CPC is in Needham. So I think it would make perfect sense that we would learn things along the way to make it more helpful. The second item I would just indicate is the town has a procedure as part of its capital submission that any items that are eligible for CPC or CPA funds that we do put an application in. So that would just be the other part of it for the town projects, that is a matter of our procedure.
Okay.
Thank you.
For sharing that. Okay, Rick, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, before we close, could we make a request to get a copy of the capital plan? I believe it's been presented already to the select board. And it would be helpful if we get a copy of the plan as well as and we don't need the whole plan, we just need the section dealing with the CPA funded projects.
Okay, Karis, can we do that? And I think what and coming up, we're gonna be meeting with Dave Davidson. We'll have him in, or at least I'll be meeting with them, and I think it's okay with the committee. It may be, well, we have to be careful about this in terms of open meeting, but I usually meet with him with Rick, who's got FinCom experience. So I don't mean it, and I think that that's perfectly okay. Yeah, it's kind of like a subcommittee, if you will, and I just hope no one's offended by that. But that's kind of
Mr. Chairman, my understanding of the open meeting law is that as long as you are, the number of people is less than what would constitute a quorum, you're okay.
Okay, good. Thank you, Paul. Thanks. All right. All right, so that's coming up and soon, okay? So we'll get some information to the committee and we'll get some information to Ricks and Bone. And yes, Joe Barnes.
Peter, you had talked about meeting with chairs of different.
Okay, yeah. I think I put that back on the agenda and that's happening. So you guys know I was kind of busy the last couple months preceding, but there is a chairs meeting that is going to happen. I talked to Karis about that. She had an agenda of like 3 or 4 things that I had to talk to her about. We went through them. I can't remember how we resolved them. We moved some things around, and one of the items was chairs meeting, and it seemed like that was an agenda item that she was going to be dealing with, right?
Yeah, it does look like there's a few discussions that have to happen in different meetings. And then after the town manager's budget is submitted, the town manager will be putting something together.
So we're going to have a chairs meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm getting. Okay. All right, good question. Any other questions? All right, we have a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Motion to adjourn.
By
Chris
Driscoll.
Second, Artie Crocker.
Artie Crocker seconds. Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Alpert,
Aye.
Barnes,
Aye.
Crocker,
Aye.
Dermody,
Aye.
Dorfman,
Aye.
Gerstle,
Aye.
Zabone,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Kristen and
Um,
Karis.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank you
Everyone.
both.
See you later.
Thanks.
Bye, Dan.
Night.
Everyone, night.